Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Happy Wednesday. We are halfway through the week. Hope everyone's having a great week so far. Really good weather this week. It was super hot last week. I know, uncomfortably hot, at least where I am here in New England. So it definitely cooled down a little bit and got a little bit more bearable this week weather-wise. But hope you're all off to a great week. I appreciate you tuning in to another episode of the show. As always, lots of Celtics talk today on the episode. I'm excited to introduce my guest that I have with me for this episode. He's the host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, John Karalis. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Gabby?
Good. I appreciate you hopping on the show with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anytime I get to talk basketball, it's my happy place.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Being able to cover sports is just such a rewarding experience, I feel like. And it's something that, how could somebody not be happy doing that if that's a passion of theirs?
I mean, you get to walk into an arena, you get to watch the sport that you love, or one of the sports that you love, depending on, it's then people give me money to talk about it and write about it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, everybody's talking about the lottery. I feel like I've hit the lottery already. So I'm sure you've experienced that, and you go around to these different events, and you at some point you look around, and you're like, I can't believe somebody's actually sent me here to do this.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody. I would do it for free, but I won't now at this point. But yeah, it's wild. It's fun.
Yeah, that's so cool. It must be such an amazing experience for you, really. Could you just give us a little bit of an overview as to how you got involved with covering the Celtics?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd been in television for, I started working in TV a very long time ago, probably before you were born. And I'd been in the news side, but friend of mine, Chuck McKinney, and I, we started a blog in 2006 called redsarmy.com. And, it was originally just like goofing around, just having strictly a lot of fun and needling. The Celtics were just horrible at the time. And, we looked around at the landscape, and Celtics blog was the original, and they were doing a lot of like straightforward writing, and Celtics Hub with Zach Lowe. I don't know how many people remember or realize that he got his start blogging about the Celtics, and he was Celtics Hub. So he very obviously was analytical and awesome at that. So we were like, well, he's got that covered, and Celtics blog's got the writing covered. We're just going to be a couple of idiots photoshopping and doing a bunch of goofy stuff. And so that's what we did at the first couple of years. And eventually, as the blogging platforms got more sophisticated and we were able to write more and to do it more easily and quickly as like side little things while we were actually doing our other jobs, it started to evolve, and I started to do more straightforward writing. And as the site became more popular, I just continued to do that while working in TV. And then in 20, I will say, right around actually the thing that pushed me into it full time, I'd been working in news for a long time, and I was covering the election, and the politics had just gotten so toxic.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I am done. I am done with all of this craziness. I'm sick of talking about all of this stuff every single day. It's the absolute worst. And so I quit my job. I was working in New York City. I was doing some on-air work. I was doing, a lot of producing and all of that. And I just, I quit, and I came back to Boston, and I said, I'm going to do this full time, and hopefully I can land on my feet. And then shortly after that, I ended up just getting a job at Mass Live. The timing worked out where Jay King left Mass Live, went to the Athletic, and I ended up getting the job. And so that was like 2017, I believe. And so since then I've been covering the team full time, starting at Mass Live and then over to Boston Sports Journal. But also while that had been going on, I started doing podcasts before they were called podcasts, like literally before they were called podcasts. It was basically online radio. And then Jay King and I had started a podcast that went to the Locked On Podcast Network. And then Jay ultimately left and went to the Athletic and did the Athletic podcast. And I stuck around and kept the Locked On Celtics podcast. So I've been doing that for 6 years or so. So, I mean, it's 6 or 7 years. So that's been going on simultaneously. So it's been a long road, but now I'm in a great place covering the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. Podcast is doing great. I'm very, very fortunate that people have turned to my podcast as one of their sources for information and entertainment. And I appreciate that so much, and hopefully I get to continue to do that for a while.
Yeah, it's cool to think about just how big the podcast space has become, because even a few years ago, podcasts were just really not as big of a thing. But now so many people go to podcasts as one of their main sources of, like you said, entertainment or information on certain things that they're interested in hearing about. And it continues to grow that space.
It's so funny because it started out, podcasts were big and then they faded away. And it was like, well, all right, the podcast kind of drifted into people weren't really that interested, because it became very difficult. You have to find it, then you have to download it onto your iPod, which is why it's called a podcast.
Yeah.
iPods don't exist anymore, except for like the 5 people who are still holding on to the past. But now with the technology kind of caught up, and it's very easy now that you have Spotify or Apple or whatever, the podcast space, it's very easy for people to enter that. So that brought them back. And I think the local radio has had this stranglehold on things for so long. And now what we're seeing is, think about cable and radio had the same type of monopolies, where if you wanted to watch something, a sports show or whatever, you had to be in front of a cable box and watch it. And same thing with radio. You have to have a radio on you to listen to, if you want to listen to whatever, EI or Sports Hub. Now you have it all in the palm of your hand. So what have we seen? We've seen the proliferation of streaming services. So now you can pick, do I like, what Disney Plus has? I'm going to subscribe to that. If I want these 2 or 3 things, I'm going to subscribe to those, and I'll take them with me wherever I go, and I can watch what I want. Podcasts now, if you're a Celtics fan and EEI and Sports Hub either aren't talking about enough or you don't like what they're saying, now you've got options. You can say, I choose to listen to some of these other things. So it's the ability to take things with you, customize your experience, has led to this huge boom in podcasting. And now it's just a matter of, the competition means that you got to stay on your toes. I know I've been out here for a while. Gabby, you're coming at my neck. I know you are. You want my job. You want, if it's not me, it's somebody else's, right? Like that's like, and I'm like kind of joking, but I'm serious. Like you want to build something and talk about sports for a living, just like everyone else coming out of college, everybody who's asking me for advice, all of the sports journalism schools, programs out there, everybody wants to do this thing. Now it's a matter of, can I fight off some of the competition? Is there enough room for us to share some of that space? And do the people who are coming up like you, do you have the time and the effort and the wherewithal and the desire to stick through this? Because I can tell you, the first few years of doing the podcast, the checks that I got for doing the podcast were like, okay, what am I doing here? What am I really doing here? Why am I killing myself for like $10? And now it's very much more sustainable. But I always said, like, the reason why I'm even in this position is because I was too stupid to quit. who else is out there that's too stupid to quit after if you do this for 3-4 years, and you're like, oh man, I got a better job offer. I'm just going to do that. And you leave and you've left all of the progress that you've made. And that's the interesting part. I'm very curious to see what this next wave brings and how people react and how people find these things and what continues to make these things popular.
Yeah, and I feel like being able to create your own opportunities is a big part of this as well too, and being able to find ways to grow your craft and your work on your own, because not always those opportunities aren't always going to come to you right away. So being able to create those opportunities for yourself to get your work out there and get noticed by people is going to be a huge thing when it comes to the future in terms of breaking into the industry.
Yeah, look, we started out redsarmy.com, and we had this big dream of like, hey, we could do all Boston sports, because we built Reds Army into something, viable. It was good. And then so we started Ted's Army. We did the Red Sox thing. We started, my brother was running it, and we had a really good team of writers. And then, the advertising didn't quite come in the same way. The numbers weren't always great. We couldn't capitalize on the Reds Army name, like pushing a lot of people. You tend to think like, hey, I've got this. I'm just going to push it to these people. I've got a big social following. That's going to drive the podcast. You're like, it does to a degree, but not ever to what you think it's going to be. And it's hard to translate that stuff. So it's a challenge. The whole thing is a challenge, and it's very hard to build up, and it's very easy to lose. Which is the same thing I can say about my weight, but it's the same type of concept where you build it way, way up, and then you're like, okay, and something else comes along, you have to make a decision. Like you and a lot of other podcasters out there and people coming up, the next generation, there are going to be points in your career where you're like, okay, I have to make a decision. Am I going to take this job, which I think is a good opportunity and it's going to pay me more money, but I have to give up this other stuff? Or am I going to invest in myself and hopefully see this other stuff through? And there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. And that's where you're going to have the hard part. It's almost as if you're facing a decision of whether to trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant or not. And you don't know which way it's going to go, but you have to make that decision in your life. Do I trade what I'm doing now, where I think it's got a ton of promise, but I don't know no guarantee, or take this other thing and you feel like, I know it's going to make my career better in the short term, but I don't know how that's going to be the long-term impact.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And being able to understand that there are going to be risks involved, and deciding whether you are willing to take those risks or not.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, everything's a risk. Everything is a risk. And you have to have the confidence in yourself. And, look, and it's also, for me, it was easy to have the confidence in myself because I have I have the history of playing basketball. I was already working another job. So this was always a side hustle until I decided to make that leap. But it's harder for someone just going through a sports journalism program and coming out and being like, okay, I've entered this space. But it's saturated. It's a saturated space, and it's hard for people to break in and stick and stand out. And this is a real challenge. Like, now what do you do to stand out becomes the bigger question. And you find the real temptation of, okay, well, do I just go hot take? Because if I go hot take, it's hard to come back from being the hot take person. And there are a lot of hot take people out there. And you got to be really, really good at it. And you got to be really willing to see this thing through and buy into the persona. And it's not easy. And it's still, the market has changed a lot for women, but it's still tougher for a woman to establish, like, you have to prove over and over and over again that you know what you're talking about. it's very easy for me to walk in, look like I do, and say, hey, I played basketball. Believe what I say. Because people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I that checks out. You got to say, hey, I know about, basketball or baseball or whatever. And people go, oh, really? Well, who was the third baseman on the 1986 Red Sox? And you're like, oh,
That's so
Jesus,
true.
this again? Like, so it is harder for you, which increases your frustration and maybe leads you to make a decision that you're like, I'm so pissed about this. I cannot take it anymore. And you go a different direction. Or, yes, there are more women in sports broadcasting, but you're still mostly sideline reporters and only starting to get into the play-by-play and the color and the stuff like that. It still becomes like you're still like, I don't know how many miles, if it's a mile, if it's 10 miles, if it's 100, like, I don't know exactly how much. I mean, women are catching up, but it's very much still a boys club. And I understand, like, somebody like me, I just walk on in, and I know people, I have an instant credibility because people see me. I'm 6'5", I'm a dude, I get the bald head, and they go, oh yeah, you said you played? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's talk. Come on in. You come in, you're like, you got to come up with schemes. You got to, like, basically coach out a whole game for them to go, all right, maybe. Stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even just on social media, I deal with that on a regular basis too, on Twitter and everything like that. There's a lot of people out there like that who still feel like if you're a female, they almost have to test you more on your knowledge
Oh
about
yeah.
certain things just to see if you actually know what you're talking about or not. And I always say I don't think that they would do this if they were speaking to a man right now.
Probably not. Probably not. Like, I will say, just for me, my own experience, I've never had to prove that I know what I'm talking about. I mean, I think when I am talking, it comes out and people say, well, okay, that sounds like somebody who knows what they're talking about might say. So thankfully I've got that. But even if I were to feed you a script of everything and you were to say it, I guarantee you that your mentions would be much different than my mentions, even though we were saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think so too. I've noticed that certain things like that too. So that's what makes it unfortunate, but also for me over time, those have motivated me more, those types of
Mhm.
people, because I've realized there's so many more people who are supportive of me and what I do than people who aren't. So I continue to kind of do what I do for those people and also to prove to those other people who do have the doubts that I do know what I'm talking about and I can carry a conversation about sports with them. And a lot of times, even I'll just be at a bar or something with friends and I'll start talking about sports just naturally because that's just what I do, what I talk about. And if I'm talking about sports with a guy, he'll start being pretty overly confident at the beginning of the conversation. But then sometimes once he realizes that I can carry a conversation with him about that,
Mhm.
he'll start to kind of progressively, this happened the other day, he'll start to progressively get quieter as the conversation goes on, to knowing that I'm confident and that I can really hold that conversation with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to, like, shut a dude up, like
Yeah.
that's, like, all right, calm down there, but I'm glad that we're getting to a point now where more people are just like, accepting of it. And
Yeah.
it's, progress is generally slow, but when it comes to this job, um, I always tell people what we do as sports journalists covering a team in whatever capacity. If you're a beat writer, a columnist or something, if you're working in the media, you are in a very similar position as the athletes that we cover. There are limited spots, and the second you say, oh, I'm out, I retire, I quit, people are like, oh, that's a shame, and hand a resume in at the same time. Like, oh, that's a shame, hate to see you go, I'll take your job. Because the competition is so intense. The Celtics have 15 roster spots and two-ways, 17 players. And if Al Horford says, this is my last season, then There'll be the, oh, wow, Al Horford, that's great. What a great career you've had. And 10 agents calling Brad Stevens like, hey, you need another big man now. Here's my guy. Here's this guy. Here's that guy. And so it's the same for us. It's the same for us. I understand that. I understand that competition is intense. If I were ever to say, I'm leaving the Locked On Celtics podcast, I'm done, how many people would go to David Locke and be like, I want to host your podcast?
A ton of people.
Right? You might be one of them. Like, people are like, oh, this is so great. Like, you want to hop in that driver's seat and go. So I understand that for my seat, there's probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who want to do what I do just on the podcast. And then forget about, Boston Sports Journal. If I ever left that, same thing.
Yeah.
So, but that's what you face. You're one of those people. You're one of those people trying to break into the, hey, there's a ton of competition. And now you're one of the salmon swimming upstream, trying to get to that spot. And so it's when you're in that competition, that's where you have the temptation to do things to stand out. And that's when any disadvantage that you have becomes magnified, because you start to wonder, did I not get this job because I'm a woman? Did they, and you got to be careful about those types of things chipping away at your confidence and increasing your frustration level, because any kind of disadvantage gets magnified. And if you just, it can eat you up. It can eat you up, and you can get sick of the whole thing in a real hurry. And it's almost kind of like the point of the system as it is. Like, it's to weed out all of the people who are getting too frustrated and all of that stuff. Fair or unfair, people are getting weeded out daily in this business. And it's the people who find that level of perseverance. And like I said, when you start adding layers, women of color, women of different ethnicities, women of different sexual orientations, different identities, like the more levels you add to it, the more that can weigh you down. And it's very, very difficult in this system to get out of the, this is the pattern of people who are, this is how you're supposed to look when you're talking about sports. It's very difficult to kind of break into that. And the more you have to carry with you, the harder it is to get to where you want to go. It's like we're all in a race, and not only do I get a head start, you have to wear this backpack with, full of books. And you're like, how am I supposed to catch up to that dude who's already got a head start on me? And now I'm weighed down with all this stuff. It's hard. It's very, very hard. And it's almost unfair to say, well, you got to figure it out, but you got to figure it out. And that's the tough part. And, change eventually will start to at least take some of the books out of that backpack and start to level the playing field a little bit. And we'll see how long it takes. I think one of the things that you can look forward to is this proliferation of media, like we started out talking about, gives you more options where there are more outlets that are going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to focus primarily on women to come on in. And each new outlet that does that now puts you into the pool, right? It gets you into that mix. So it's interesting. I'd be honest with you. I'm glad that I'm in my seat and not in yours, because it's an unenviable position. But if you know it and you know that that's what you face, then at least you could be somewhat prepared for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's something I've been dealing with, and it's just something that's a reality of the situation, unfortunately. But figuring out how to work through that and continue to push through, because not everybody would in that situation, like you said, is how it's going to get people to hopefully get to where they want to be, because those challenges aren't going to just go away.
Yeah, nope. They're going to be there. The system is designed to be this way, and people's habits are hard to break. So it's tough. It's definitely tough. But hey, progress is being made. Is it enough? Is it fast enough? No, probably not. at least, I mean, I can say this from, my perspective, at least some progress is being made. And I'm sure from your perspective and many other women in the business, you might be thinking, and women listening might say, yeah, that's nice. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to kick the door down. I wholly encourage anybody who feels marginalized, anybody in these marginalized groups to, hey, sometimes you got to kick the damn door down. Do it. Yeah. Because eventually I'm going to go away, right? Eventually I am going to be out of here. And we need more perspectives. We need more people's perspectives. You can't have me and a bunch of clones like me, a bunch of big bald dudes talking sports. It's the same stuff. Like, I hopefully offer something valuable, but I want to hear what other people say. You can't come to solutions. You can't come to a good spot in any conversation if you're not polling other people's kind of opinions, just because, I have my experience having played basketball and all that doesn't mean I'm the end of the story when it comes to basketball. Everybody has a unique opinion. And for me, hearing what you have to say and what other people have to say that aren't me, that informs my opinion. That helps me still grow even at 49 years old. That helps me continue to grow and go, oh, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. That adds to my perspective. And like, okay, I'm going to start incorporating some of that into what I say and hopefully continue to grow my opinions, because everybody's opinion is always, evolving. Who you are as a person is always evolving. Who I am at 49 is not who I was at 39 and definitely not who I was at 29. And hopefully that, hopefully most people have like an open mind enough to say, okay, I know that, oh, she's a girl, but great. She's a girl. Great. I don't look at basketball like a girl does. What do you see? Is there anything in your experience that makes you say something different? Because that actually is meaningful. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. That's the great thing about being able to talk about sports with people, is being open to other opinions and other ideas, because people's thoughts on different things are always going to be different. And the more open and receptive to hearing that you are, the more you could be like, oh yeah, that's a really good point that I didn't really think of at first. And then it could just create further discussion. And so I feel like people being able to be open to those perspectives is what just makes it as fun as it is too.
Yeah, I agree. I love hearing different takes, different people from different perspectives. It's very interesting to hear how people look at and see the same thing, the same event, the same thing. It's like different perspective gives you like, oh wow, how did I not see that? So with that in mind, Gabby, what do you think about Jaylen Brown and Kevin Durant? Do you think the Celtics should make the move? What do you think of the rumors that are out there?
Yeah, this is obviously definitely such a big topic right now going on. Celtics fans on Twitter kind of going back and forth on this. So I've very much been in the camp of, and I'm still in the camp of, not making the trade for KD. And there's a couple reasons for that. One of the biggest ones for me is I look at this team who just went to the finals, and, I think kind of exceeded a lot of the expectations people had for them going into the season with, a first year head coach, still a young core that they did have, and being able to go to the finals and do what they did. Now they have that exposure of being in the finals. I think that's great. And so I looked at this team going into the offseason, and I said, I don't think there's really a whole lot of change that they need to make. Maybe a couple moves to address a couple holes. But overall, I don't think they need to do anything drastic. And so when the KD rumors started about, how KD wants to trade from Brooklyn and everything, I said, I don't really want him in Boston. Obviously, yes, KD is a great player, but by doing that, by trading for KD, you're giving up not only Jaylen Brown, but you're also giving up a couple other pieces that helped get you to that finals run. And so then what happens if they trade for KD? He comes to Boston, things don't work out. He decides he wants to jump ship again, because that is some things that he tends to do, is jump ship from team to team. It doesn't work out. Then where are they at? Then they gave up on some of what could be part of that future to get them to another finals run. So I'm very much in the position of I don't want to see them make a trade for KD. I'm not really completely buying all of the rumors either, because I'm not really sure how interested Brad Stevens really is. I mean, I don't doubt that he probably contacted Brooklyn, looked into some possibilities, but I don't see him being the type who would kind of pull the plug on a lot of his core that just got that team to the finals just to bring in Kevin Durant, who's, aging, doesn't always stay healthy. And we don't know how he would work chemistry wise with this team that they have right now.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points. And I think the one point that's a little under discussed that you brought up is the what if Kevin Durant comes here and says, you know what? No, sorry. Like he has certain places that he wants to go. And what's his motivation for leaving Brooklyn? Is it to just kind of screw them over because he doesn't like how Kyrie Irving was being treated, which is an entirely different discussion and one that could probably take hours. But
I could talk about that forever, but
I know, right? Like, but if he says, hey, screw Brooklyn, I'm out of here, fine, trade me to Boston. Then he goes to Boston and it doesn't work. They don't win a championship right away. Then who's to say he doesn't next season say, you know what? Trade me. I always wanted to go to Phoenix, and now Phoenix has money and whatever. Like, now you can trade me. So trade at that point. If you gave up Jaylen and Marcus Smart and Grant Williams, now you're stuck. Now you're complete disaster. And I don't trust KD to do that either. So to stick around and honor that contract. If you request a trade with 4 years left, you can certainly feel empowered to request a trade with 2 or 3 years left. So I'm with you. I've been saying it all along. I think it's keep Jaylen, and I understand people want to say, but it's Kevin damn Durant.
Yep.
It's Kevin freaking Durant. Like,
yeah, so true.
I just don't accept the retort of repeating the guy's name. Laying out the same, explanation that you just did and having somebody come back and go, but it's Kevin freaking Durant. Like, yeah, I know who we're talking about. I am aware of the player on the other side. I've laid out a reason. If your reason is, but it's Kevin Durant, like, no, then you're overlooking a ton. Like the points that you just brought up, the fact that he's going to be 34, the fact that he's had prior catastrophic injuries, the fact that he has a slight body. And as you age, like, I still fear the risk of those injuries happening. The fact that the Celtics have a core, like you mentioned, that has just done it, and there's no guarantee you're going to go back, but it was just there. You've built around it, and you have tools to improve the team that you have. So if you go into the season, you go, they don't have the same kind of fire. So at that point, you can say, okay, we're gonna move a couple of pieces. We have a couple more traded player exceptions. We can add some more complementary pieces here, but I'm 100% on the keep Jaylen train. I think he's got so much more basketball to give. And I think there's a much longer term possibility of keeping this window open by keeping Jaylen rather than trading him.
Yeah, because then there's the people who are like, but KD's a better player than Jaylen. And
yeah,
it's like,
right now.
Yeah, but then, yeah, right now he is, sure. But I mean, he's played, first of all, he's had more time. He's played longer. And for 2, I think for Jaylen Brown, like, he's kind of just getting started with what he can do in terms of his potential with this team. And we just haven't seen him hit his ceiling yet, which I think is a good thing because that creates a longer window. So if they're trading for Kevin Durant, they're then looking at a shorter championship window, in my opinion, than if they keep that young core together that they have now, because then you're looking at a much longer championship window that, yeah, if they don't win next year and they don't have KD, those people who are on the trade for KD train are going to be saying, well, if we got KD this year, we would have won the whole thing, so there are going to be people like that, but those people aren't looking at the longer term aspect of it either. Of what would you rather have? Would you rather give up a lot of those young pieces for Kevin Durant now, and then you really have to be in win now mode because of what you're giving up to get him? And then if you don't win in that time span, then what do you do? I mean, even like Brooklyn now, like what they gave up to get James Harden, and then it didn't even work out with James Harden for them either. And then they had to give up a lot of pieces to get him. And now there's a whole mess with the Kyrie and KD situation over there. So I would not want to be a Brooklyn fan right now. That's a tough situation over there. But I'm looking at this as, if I'm Brad Stevens, I'm trying to think of the long-term aspect of this team as well. And for the long term, I don't think Kevin Durant is going to be the best option. And, there's obviously a lot of factors to consider here. Like, yes, he played with Jason Tatum. We know this. But that doesn't necessarily mean that from a chemistry standpoint with the whole team, it's going to work. Like he and Tatum could complement each other well and play well together. But who's to say that overall team chemistry is going to work there? Because chemistry is a huge thing in basketball. And we saw this team, especially in the second half of the season when things really were starting to come together for them and they were playing really good basketball, that chemistry they had worked. And that's what got them to where they were. And I feel like that's taking a huge risk trying to jeopardize that to get somebody like Kevin Durant, who we know on teams he's been on in the past hasn't always been the best team guy from a chemistry standpoint.
Yeah, it's a good point to bring up, because this is a team that's built that through the fire. They've gone through the 18-21 last season and that turnaround, and buying into Ime Udoka and kind of everybody going through the rumors and the all of the stuff that had been said over November, December, and January. To come through that, there was that moment after beating Miami where Tatum and Brown were hugging and Tatum was saying, they said we couldn't play together. That stuff, that moment is meaningful to me because it shows they heard all the stuff that people were saying. They heard everything. And that was their see, we told you.
Yeah.
That's chemistry. That's something that's meaningful. And Jason Tatum saying that he loved the guys that they have on this team is meaningful. So I understand the motivation. There is some level of, it's Kevin freaking Durant, and he's 34, and the window, as you mentioned before, the window is open a little wider at first if he stays healthy and all of that stuff. And in the NBA, there is very much a if you can make your move now, make it now and worry about tomorrow. That is a very prevalent attitude in the NBA. But I still think tomorrow matters. And the real question, Gabby, is what do you give up? And when you make the deal, have you given up enough or so much that, you've got Durant and Tatum and that's great, but have you given up so much that you haven't made a significant step forward? Maybe you made a small step forward, but you've thinned out your roster to a point where, okay, if everybody stays healthy and it's good, then okay, you can say this team is better than last year's team and better than it might have been with Jaylen and Marcus or whatever. You can make that argument. But Kevin Durant has a history of missing games, especially lately. And if you've thinned out your roster to a point where you've given up 2 starters and 1 other rotation player, and he misses time, who do you turn to make that up? I just don't see that. And I can't get past the fact that they've already let the traded player exception expire. Then that would have been $17 million, where if you gave up 3 for 1, you could have gotten Durant, and you could have tried to scan the league for somebody who makes up the $17 million to fill one of those other roster spots. And you say, all right, now we've traded for Durant. Okay, that was painful. But on top of that, we've got $17 million that we can use to get another player in. So that helps a lot. We can get a pretty good player. And now we have these other 2 TPEs. We can get somebody in there. And now we're really, really making our run. It might be a 2-year window, but we're making our run. You want banner 18? Here it is. I can see that, but I can't see it's August and we're going to gut the roster and we've given away a major tool to kind of replenish that roster. I don't think that's the smartest way to go about this. If you were going to trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant, you should have done it before July 18th.
Yep. Because
then you could have replenished your roster behind that move. And I just don't see it. Honestly, what I think is most likely is that Brad Stevens is talking to Sean Marks and he says, "Hey, if you do deal with Phoenix and you need a third team, keep me in mind, and I can take a third player off your hand. If you got a really good player that you just nobody has a roster spot for and he makes $6 million, we can take him and we can help facilitate that trade." But I think that's much more likely than Jaylen Brown going for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel badly for Jaylen now because he's getting a little bit frustrated. I could tell even from things that he said, and I think that that's something to consider here too. I know he was saying things about how he feels undervalued in Boston. He feels like people don't want him here. And I feel like the KD stuff is adding to that now too, because now if there's even talk that they're going to move him, Jaylen might be sitting there like, wow, people really don't want me to be here anymore.
Yeah, frustration. I mean, that's something that I think there is a level of fence mending that needs to happen between Brad and Jaylen. I think you do have to, but I also think it's as simple as, this is total crap, Jaylen. Yes, I called him. Like, it almost sounds like you have to be like the guy who was, someone sent me a picture of you and this girl. Like, no. Yes, I was there, but it's not what it looked like. It was, I was helping her with her groceries into the car. It's not what it looked like. I feel like Brad's kind of like in that spot where he's like, hey. Yes, I talked to Sean Marks. Yes, it's in my call history, but we were, talking about other stuff. We're talking about being the third team and he brought you up and, then he lied about what the discussion really was. You can smooth that out. And, I do think that Jaylen is probably frustrated. I mean, I try to see things through the player's eyes a lot. And I think if it was me, I'd be frustrated too. Because you're like,
I was.
Yeah, right. I mean, at some point you do you do have to like get past a lot of it and understand it's social media, it's sports talk radio, it's podcasts, that when something like this happens, they're going to talk about it. You're a 25-year-old guy who makes $28 million and is a former all-star and is, could have been a multiple-time all-star, has potential NBA, all-NBA, potential, moving forward. Teams are going to want you, so your name's going to come up. You have to understand that. But at the same time, when your name comes up, it's like, oh, this again? So I can see myself tweeting out SMH. Can somebody just let me live? Jaylen's like Instagramming from Spain, this gorgeous like hillside in Spain. And he's just like, let me just hit send on this Instagram. What's this notification? Oh man.
Seriously, it's so true.
Damn it. I'm about to go get like some awesome food here in this little town in Spain. I'm going to go swim in that clear blue water. And you're talking about me being traded again. Let me live. I can see that frustration. But
yeah, exactly. He's like, I just want to enjoy my off season.
Yeah, please. Jeez. But at the same time, I think he has to understand some level of this is going to follow him anywhere. So if there's a fear that he's going to leave Boston because of it, this stuff isn't happening because it's in Boston. If he was part of the Sixers, this probably would still be happening, right? If he was part of the Heat, that this would probably still be happening. Because if one of those teams wanted to get Durant, he'd still be the guy no matter where he's playing. So this isn't a Boston-centric thing. This is Jaylen is a very attractive wing that everybody wants, and Kevin Durant is a transcendent talent who has some juice left. No doubt he has some juice left. So if a team wants to squeeze that last bit of juice, you're going to have to give up something. And Jaylen Brown is something that everybody knows you're going to have to give up. So we're all going to talk about it. I think Jaylen has to understand that and just accept, like, this is part of the deal until he makes it not part of the deal. And in 2 years, maybe he signs a 5-year super max contract or whatever it will be at that time, and put it all to bed saying, look, I'm here in Boston long-term. I've got my 5-year deal. I feel good about where we are. And maybe that'll stop some of the rumors. And then the rumors can switch over to the next guy until like 3 years from now, 3 years from then, when Jaylen gets into his, early 30s and the trade rumors start up again, like, Jaylen Brown's aging. Are the Celtics going to want to trade him to go younger? Like, that's the next phase of all of this. So there are a lot more SMHs coming from Jaylen, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point too. And, it's obviously the frustration is going to be there, but you're right. Like, he's such a desirable young talent in the league right now that he probably would be in the discussion no matter where he's playing if it involved a Kevin Durant trade. And so that's something that he, as well as everybody else, needs to realize, that it's not about Boston. It just happens to be that's where he plays, and he's in the discussion because of how many teams would definitely trade for somebody like him at his age and the level of talent that he has right now.
If the Celtics went out and said, we are shopping Jaylen Brown, trades will now be heard for Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens would need 5 phones to get all the phone calls, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how good, like, people need to, that's how good Jaylen Brown is. And Jaylen needs to understand that. Like, Jaylen needs to understand, and he probably does. I'm going to assume that he does. I mean, he's a smart guy. He understands the business of the NBA. He's been around it long enough to just get that, this aspect of it. And he can use it as, like, hey, I'm so damn good that everybody wants me. And if you've got Kevin Durant and you say, oh my God, we have this basketball titan, this god of gods, we will trade him to you. And in exchange for a god, we will take Jaylen Brown. And, like, that is enough. Like, Jaylen, I'd be like, I know you don't want to hear your name in trade rumors, but if you're seen as potentially the best player that a team trading Kevin Durant can get, I'd say that's pretty high praise, and it's not the way you want to hear the praise, but it's still high praise because it means that you're valued extraordinarily highly, and a team that wants to start over and needs a cornerstone will see you as a cornerstone. And the one point that people keep bringing up, I think the natural follow-up, I don't want to take anything out of your mouth, it's just a stream of consciousness in my head, people will throw out there is, well, do you think he wants to go and be the number one somewhere? And that's one of the questions that we'll have to get an answer. Like, at some point, and I don't think, like, I could ask him, but I don't think Jaylen would ever answer that. I would hope that he understands that this whole concept of number one, number two is an outside basketball thing. That's something for, like, me and you to talk about, because we're not in the NBA, right? I think everybody in the NBA knows that number one, number two is only, like, it doesn't mean anything. When Jaylen has the ball, it's whatever matchups are in front of you. Jaylen is one of the guys that the team leans on. And each team has, like, sure, LeBron is a number one guy. We all know that. But in each situation, whoever has the right matchup is the guy that should go make his move and try to score. And Jaylen's one of the guys that's trusted to do that in Boston. The offense leans towards Jason, but Jaylen is one of those guys too. And I think whether he's the number one guy in the opinion of somebody like me is meaningless, because whether it's about what he is viewed as on the team, in that film room, on the plane. That's where it matters the most. And I think, I do think at that, in that regard, Jaylen is kind of happy with where he is.
Yeah, I feel like his role here, what he's expected to do in Boston is good for him, and I feel like just the way he fits in with this team, and we saw it during this past run with the finals. I think what Jaylen does for Boston right now and his contribution is a perfect spot for him to be in terms of a, role player.
Yeah, it's a really good spot for him because he's leaned on for a lot. Like
Yeah.
it again, Jason Tatum Jason Tatum has taken a leap, right? And has vaulted himself into first team all NBA. And so people talk about it as this is Jason first and then Jaylen. But I think the Celtics are at their worst when you do a pecking order like that. And I think what the Celtics have been working towards is making it a more egalitarian type of offense. Brad Stevens has been trying to do that for years. He brought in Ime Udoka partly because Ime was part of that San Antonio Spurs team that exemplified that type of offense. And we saw this past season trying to get that ball moving. And I think one of Jaylen's issues is he gets the ball sticks a little too much with him. But I think that's partly because the ball sticks in other spots first. And if the Celtics can get to where the ball moves the way it's supposed to move, then everybody's going to eat, right? Jason is going to get his points. Jaylen's going to get his points. And that will make it the exact situation that you're talking about. The place where everybody plays their roles, and Jaylen's role is going to be to do a lot more than, Derek White's role is going to be. Like Jaylen's going to be, one of your top two guys. But if everyone just moves and passes and cuts and does and screens and does all the stuff that they're supposed to do and doesn't fall into the trap of, well, now's the time where I got to take over. I mean, sure, there are some times when that's necessary, but let that happen organically and find that time. If somebody gets hot, if Jason gets hot, great, feed him. If Jaylen gets hot, great, feed him. I want to see more flow, more movement late in games, especially. And then you'll see the full potential of what Jaylen can do in that role that you're talking about, keeping him, he can do so much. He's such a great attacker. He's better at attacking the basket than Jason Tatum is. He's better at finishing than Jason Tatum is. And he can do a lot of these things and do them very, very well. And get all of the accolades. He can make an all-NBA team. He has the ability to make an all-NBA team. He has the ability to make more all-star teams. And he's got two choices, in my opinion. If in 2 years he says, I haven't gotten enough personal shine, I got to go somewhere else where I can, okay, fine. Or you can sit around here, you can stay here, assuming that you don't get traded. You can stay here and make the Celtics a winner. And when the Celtics win, everybody gets their shine, and you will get your individual shine, and you will get all-star appearances because you're gonna have like 2 or 3 from the number 1 seed, and you're gonna have all NBA appearances because teams, voters value winning. And if they say, well, Jason Tatum is first team and Jaylen Brown is second team or third team, or whatever, then that's great. You've made all NBA. You have an all NBA, and that's more valuable than all stars. And once you make that in the next couple of years, now you've got a supermax contract. Now you can get 35% of the cap, so you can start making like $45 million a year plus 8% raises instead of 5. Like, oh my God! Now, ho, that's like the Powerball or the Mega Millions, So it's. To me, it's simple, and to your point, he's in a good spot where he can play a really important role.
Yep.
And it's a good place. No matter what noise is around on the outside, I think on the inside, Celtics are a really stable, good place to play basketball. From the top, from the owners, down to Brad, down to Ime, down to the players. That is a very strong, stable environment. So if the talking heads want to spew stuff, then I know it's hard to tell Jaylen just ignore it because it's out there everywhere, but you got to take it with the appropriate amount of salt, not just a grain, a spoonful, whatever it is, because if the inside stuff is good, then the outside stuff is just noise.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree for sure. And I think obviously time will tell in terms of Jaylen and really how he's feeling about everything. I ultimately don't think though that they're going to end up trading for Durant. I think at the end of the day this is all just kind of talk, and that they're not actually going to make a deal for him, because I think Brad Stevens, I mean, obviously nobody can get inside the guy's head, but I just feel like Brad Stevens would not want to give up that much for KD. So I'm not really seeing it happen. Do you think that if they don't get Kevin Durant, which I assume that they are, I'm just going to likely assume they're not going to. Do you like the moves that they did make this offseason, and do you think that that's enough going into this season in terms of improving the team for this upcoming year?
I do like the moves. I thought Brogdon was a great pickup.
Yeah.
And
They didn't have
yeah,
to give up a whole lot for him really either in terms of that package that they gave them for him.
yeah, I think, I think if you look at everything, like, no offense to Malik Fitz and Nick Stauskas, but those guys were gone anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, if they use their TPE to get a guy who made $17 million, they would have probably cut those guys. They might have moved Aaron Nesmith anyway. And Daniel Tice probably would have been moved as, a tax liability. So in the end, you have a player who's really good that supports the team. All those other guys are gone, and you don't have the TPE. And that was going to be the result one way or the other. So I think their offseason has gone well. Brogdon is a great pickup. I think that Gallinari is going to help a lot during the regular season, and we'll see how he's used during the playoffs. But I think he can take some pressure off of Al Horford, which is going to be really, really important.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think what the Celtics did was they built they supported Jaylen and Jason a little bit more by giving them a little bit more help off the bench, by taking some stuff off their plate, which will help them. And then I think it's enough to head into the regular season and kind of see how it works. And then they have the two remaining traded player exceptions, one just under 7 million, one just under 6. And those expire in January and February. So you've got until basically the trade deadline, and you can use those. If something doesn't work, you can say, all right, let's scan the league for guys who might fit in those and try to fix what doesn't work. And I think it's a really, really good place to be, because you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. You think, hey, this should work, but if it doesn't, you give yourself room to get out of it. You're not painting yourself into a corner, and you feel comfortable in the established stuff already, the year under the belt with Ime Udoka, and building on that stuff. You feel good that stuff's going to carry you through while you tinker on the edges to fix a bench and get the appropriate amount of help in to build a solid contender to get you in the mix for that number 1 seed, and accomplish all the goals that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the biggest things really when it came down to it during that playoff run was that young core's lack of experience in terms of being there and that big stage of being in the finals. And you look at that Warriors team who was vastly more experienced, and they've been there, done that before. They knew kind of what to expect being in the finals. They've done it before, and with Ime being a first-year head coach, and also just that core not having been to the finals before, I think that was huge for them to have gotten that exposure and gotten their feet wet by being there. And that to me is one of the biggest things going into this upcoming season that I think is going to be one of the biggest things that's going to help them, is now they have that exposure and they know what that's like of being on that big stage and being there. So they can only grow on that from here going forward now. So I looked at this past offseason and I was like, I don't really think they have to make a lot of big drastic moves, really. They can do a couple things to kind of round out this roster, maybe help with depth purposes, which is what they were doing. And that is what they did. They got some more help off the bench now. But overall, I'm still looking at that core as a core that can take them back to the finals potentially. I mean, the Eastern Conference is still going to be really tough, but I think that's going to help them that the most this season is the experience now.
Yeah, I think you saw that in game 5 of the finals, where through the first 4 games, I thought the Celtics were the more talented team. I thought they were, Steph is Steph, but I thought they had enough talent in the right places where I was like, if they just can just hold on to the ball a little bit, do these things, you can win this.
Those turnovers were rough.
Brutal, right? But in game 5, the Warriors hit this level, and it was just, okay. That now they're playing basketball, and I think it's that experience that you just talked about, that they leaned on that, and they knew. I think one of the most important parts of the experience is that no panic. They didn't panic after losing game 1 at home. The Celtics go into Golden State and win game 1, and everybody on the outside is, oh my God, what did the Celtics just do? This is awesome. This is amazing. Yeah. And the Warriors are just like, okay, that sucked. But, like Draymond after the game is like, I don't think this stuff is going to happen again, so we're good. And we clowned him a little bit, but he was right. Like, I think these guys, the Warriors, it's the calm under pressure, right? You see it like the concept in movies, like these war movies or something like that. They're firing, the bombs are falling, the bullets are flying, and it's the person who's just like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. Rather than the person who's like, oh my God, they're trying to kill me. What's going on? Like, you can't panic in that moment. You got to be like, all right, no problem. Oh, you just hit me in the mouth? Okay, let's roll. That kind of attitude comes with the experience. Some people get hit in the mouth. They go, oh crap, that really hurt. Don't hit me in the mouth again. And some people say like, okay, good punch. Now my turn. And like, when somebody gives you that now my turn, you're like, oh, okay. This is going to be a fight. Okay. So I think that was the dynamic that we had in the finals, where when the Warriors hit game 5 and they hit a gear that the Celtics just didn't have, it was like, okay, this is where winning time and the experience was meaningful. And you hate to have that lesson be learned in that situation, because finals trips are so few and far between. You got to hope that Tatum and Brown are the guys to keep you going there. But you hate to have that be the place where you learn that lesson, because unless you get back, it's hard to apply that lesson. But that moment of, okay, we probably panicked. We lost our composure. We didn't stick to the things that we knew we should have stuck to, but we kind of blew it, for lack of a better term. And when they rose up, we shrunk. And I think people are not talking about the potential for the internal growth as much as maybe they should be right now. Just because these are the rumors, and it's the guys that they've signed, the adding to the team. Very easy to conceptualize. Oh, Malcolm Brogdon's on the team. Here's how he might be used. They could get Kevin Durant. Here's how he would be used. It's harder to conceptualize the Jason Tatum will start dribbling 3 inches lower to the ground. And here's like, I can't, people have like, what? Like, no, there's a box where you should be dribbling and doing your crossover. Like, what box? What are you talking about? Like, that stuff is harder to conceptualize. But that internal growth that you're talking about, the experience, that's going to be huge. More than anything than the Celtics can add, which is obviously very helpful, how Tatum and Brown and Smart, especially those 3 guys, Robert Williams to a degree, but he was more hurt, but still he him too, how those guys respond to that lesson. What do you do? How do you learn it? How do you process it? What are you doing now when we can't see you? I mean, obviously you're Instagramming from Spain and other places, but what are you doing in those times where we can't see you? And what are you coming back with? What are you adding to your game? What are you adding to your mentality? What are you adding to your demeanor? That's the stuff more than anything that's going to determine whether the Celtics get back to the finals and have a chance if they can learn the right lessons and grow. Going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, just like human beings on any level, these are human beings who are growing. If they can grow, learn from a real devastating moment, grow from that, get better, then you have the potential for this window to stay open for a long time. And that more than anything might be the determining factor in whether a trading for Kevin Durant or not trading for Kevin Durant is deemed as a success. If you don't trade for KD, and I'm with you, I don't think they do. If you see that growth internally and they get back to the finals and all of a sudden, maybe they win it next year or they win it the year after, you can say, we bet on our young guys to grow, and they did. Yeah. So that I think is super, super important.
Yeah, and I feel like that says a lot about Brad Stevens and, his trust in the young core too, and being able to show that he cares about their individual growth and just the growth of the team as a whole. And it kind of sends a message to them like, yeah, we don't feel like we need somebody like Brad Stevens or somebody like Kevin Durant rather, because we have you as a group here who are young and have shown that you have the potential to go all the way. And so I want to be able to allow you guys to be able to succeed and do that.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a very motivational, it'd be kind of a wild motivational thing. Can you imagine Brad going in to the group and be like, I could have traded 2-3 of you guys for Kevin Durant, but I didn't. Yeah. And it's because I believe in you. And exactly. It's like, thanks. I'm glad that you believe in me, but like, I don't want to hear how close I was to being moved.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But it's true though. It's true. He could very easily, when Brad sits in front of the media and, I ask him the question, hey, Brad, you had the potential to be making some serious moves. There are a lot of rumors and stuff. What made you stick with this plan? He could very easily say, hey, this is because I believe in this plan. I believe in these guys, and, probably dismiss a lot of these rumors. But like, obviously when KD comes around and is available, you have to check to see what it would take. You have to. But at the same time, we knew the price would be too high because we value our guys very highly. And so that's why it never went anywhere. That's a very easy thing for him to say. It's a very nice message for him to send to his team. And it's just, Ime can turn that around and be like, hey, we know how things can go in this league. This franchise is betting on you. And that I think is a good point, that Ime can turn around and be like, they're betting on you, and you have to deliver. Because if you don't deliver now, then the stuff that you SMH'd over, you're going to keep on hearing it, because the reaction is going to be like, there's going to be a whole lot of people in sports talk radio with their arms crossed. They're going to go, all right, let's see how this goes. And if it doesn't go well, there's going to be a lot of, I told you, finger wagging and teeth gnashing and all of that stuff. So,
no, it's so true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting to keep an eye on this KD situation, as just to see how this all plays out with Brooklyn and everything. I don't think he ends up in Boston. He might not end up anywhere. He might end up just being in Brooklyn to start the season. I mean, who knows? So it's going to be interesting to kind of follow that situation and what happens with Kyrie and all of that too. But I really appreciate you joining me on the show today. This was great.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone, as always, I appreciate you tuning into the show. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. Go Celtics, and I will catch you all next time. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.